Where should we start off?
Well, we got all those metrics, right? So we got kind of nailed down the basic like numbers to get,
Yeah.
and then got into kind of how to attack those, right? Like how to break those down to further the assessment, but then also how to like, think about prioritizing and training each of those.
Hmm.
And then we kind of left off on how to fit it in, right? So like kind of the art side of it, how to fit those things into the schedule, how to, you know, prioritize each thing. So we could start there and we could take that high-low context and do that if you want.
Yeah. Do we want to start off as like we're through our assessment
Mm,
and we've identified where the person is,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next stage is kind of like, so we've assessed this athlete and we know where they are.
Yeah.
I guess the first question you have to ask yourself is where do you want to go, right? Like what are the individual goals for that athlete? And sometimes it's like this, it'll be a great athlete. They're like, oh, I just want to get stronger and better. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's easy. Like, what do you want to get stronger and better at? And they give you the things that they care about, right? And then in other times that they have like qualification goals. I want to qualify for semis. I want to make it to the CrossFit Games. And then you kind of look at your KPIs for those like tiers of athlete and you start reverse engineering from there. One of the things that I always ask is level of investment. And there's two sides to that. One is money, which is a really important one. And the other one is time. Right? Like some people, they have the time, but they don't have the money. It's like, yeah, I can train 3 hours a day, but I can only spend my gym membership, right? Like a CrossFit gym membership's 200 to 250 bucks a month. That's my limit. I'm there. And you're like, okay. Other people are like, money is not an obstacle. So you're like, well, you should probably do some private training sessions with a coach to manage your technique. Cause we've got those three things, right? Like we've got our strength, our endurance, and our skills. And if you can bring that skill up really quickly with some good technical coaching, I think that will maybe hide is not the best term, but it'll cover up a lot of deficiencies in strength and endurance. So that's where I would go after an assessment takes place is like, what can this person give to their training and where do they actually want to go? Because it's easy as a coach to make an assumption about somebody. You get this high level CrossFitter who comes to you, you look at their numbers and you're like, oh, wow, you're really good. And what do you want to do? And your assumption is wrong.
I totally agree with that. It's definitely goals, like even goals first, right? Like we might have already known what the goal was before even getting the numbers before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's got to start there. I mean, if the goal doesn't even relate to fitness, then we wouldn't have gotten those metrics in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, like what are we actually trying to do? And what are you actually able to do? That's the terms that I put it in my, my free course. So what do you want to do? Okay. What can you actually do? Right. It's like, do you have time to train 2-3 hours a day? And you're trying to go to the semis and you only have 30 minutes a day. It's like, oh, okay. We might have to kind of recalibrate those expectations a little bit.
Yeah. Or just be
Um,
like so sharp with your program design.
or yeah, the program's going to be wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be a fun challenge,
Yeah.
but yeah, exactly those things.
Next after that, I would look at what are they currently doing, right? Like ideally you'd want to see like a month of training because it gives you a broader picture, but sometimes a week can be good enough. So let's just create this kind of like hypothetical situation. You have somebody who wants to go to semifinals, you know what it takes. They need to be able to do, right? Like, what do you need to be able to do at semifinals? Well, you probably need to be able to do 100 chest to bars in a workout. You need to be able to snatch, clean, and jerk this much. You need to be able to deadlift this much. You need to be able to row and or run these kind of like time trials. and then you review, you start like, if you start just based on the goal without knowing where the athlete's at, you might expose them to way too much, way too soon. Or you might undershoot on what it is they need for adaptation. So, we use the chest bars, for example. They need to be able to do 100 chest bars in a single workout. And currently their max is at 30 unbroken. You're like, hey, well, this person needs to be better at chest bars. And you look at the week of their training and you're like, oh, you didn't do any chest bars last week, like 0 in a week. And the week before that, also 0. So in week 1, I'm not going to start you on a progression that builds you to 100 from like 60 or 70 because it's way too much, right? We might start with like 4 sets of 10 in a workout and then, I don't know, 2 sets of 15 or another workout. But seeing where they're at, on the flip side, you need to get better at chest bars, and you're currently doing 150 or 200 chest bar reps in a week. Okay, well, I know that just doing chest bars is not going to get you that much better at them. Or you're already just like so good at them that I can put them down here in slot 7. So knowing where they are so that you don't break them in the first month, or so that you're not like just kind of coasting through month 1 would be, I think, the next piece of that discovery puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same exact process when somebody comes in with like particularly an overuse injury. It's like, okay, what have you been doing that got you to this place? And we need to dial it back from that and start you on a progression that potentially builds back up to that, but maybe slower, or maybe with, some accessory training to build up different qualities. So yeah, exactly. You got to know where the tolerance is and what's lacking in their current program to be able to give a proper prescription, right?
So you're probably looking for, if you see like an overuse injury, most of those overuse injuries come from acute loading periods, right? Where it's like loading is fairly stagnant. And then all of a sudden, massive increase in load. We're doing 50 chest bars a week, 50 chest bars a week, 50 chest bars a week. And then it's like, oh, that week you did 150. And then the week after that, you hurt your shoulder in a snatch. What other things, maybe like accessory exercises, anything else that you think of when you're analyzing past training of an athlete?
Definitely like recovery, right? Overall stress. So there's, your allostatic load there. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you can get away with those crazy spikes, right? Probably pretty often actually. And as long as they're not like insane, but when you pile on a couple other variables that are eating up some of the recovery, then you're going to get less and less likely to have a good outcome. So if, let's say that chest to bar example, they're used to doing whatever, 50 a week, maybe one workout that has chest to bars in it. And, they have a big week of chest to bars, 2 big workouts with chest to bars. They might get away with that most of the time, but they maybe also did a really big snatch workout that same week. And then the next week they, something pops up, or, they've just been sleeping shitty. They've had a cold and they still pile on the training. Adding, the more things you add to the picture, the less likely you're going to get away with it.
Oh, yeah. So would you look at things, do you like to bucket things out into like number of times you had your arms overhead in a week, or number of times you flexed your torso forward in a week? And that's paints a more accurate picture of where the load is coming from, but more kind of like generalized joint specific instead of exercise specific.
Yeah. I think maybe more than the position, but the loading dynamic. So I think, forward bending could be a category, but I think overhead generally might not be. I think pushing versus pulling overhead have pretty different outcomes. So I think, oftentimes I'll see people that have well, the really common one is just pain with overhead pressing, right? Front of the shoulder pain, but often those people have no difficulty with pull-ups, any kind of pulling, even if it's from overhead. I kind of do this not automatically, but implicitly, I guess, just kind of like grouping those things as they're telling me. So yeah, like if they did a big deadlift workout, 2 or 3 days after a ton of burpees, those two things are like, forming a little bit of a category in my head. It's like, okay, they've flexed their spine 250 times in the last few days.
Mhm.
That's something.
Yeah.
And
I think you mentioned type of loading. What that brought to mind is like speed of loading. Can
yeah,
you
for sure.
elaborate more on that?
So yeah, particularly with like tendon issues, the slow stuff is just way, way easier to tolerate and less likely to cause, those painful issues, right? You see this all the time with, running, jumping. So, runners at the beginning of the season, after taking the winter off, they come in, the knees hurts, right? Or the side of the hip hurts or the ankle. And that's just that, sudden increase in volume, but also increase in volume of like, it's all plyometric, right? It's super, super high forces because of the rate of loading, a whole bunch of jumps in a row. So yeah, this adding speed to stuff magnifies the forces. So it just makes it easier to overdo something that's fast than something that's slow.
Right. So I made that point about like, are you counting arms over head reps? Yes, but with the caveat that I'm classifying strict tempo pull-ups and strict presses much differently than I am bar muscle ups and push jerks.
Yeah. Again, it's like all these things are kind of floating around, right? You're getting all this information, and they mention two things that have to do with the rate of loading. And you're like, oh, okay. So this is starting to group as like an issue to do with the rate of load. And then it might be the total opposite, right? Might be heavy, slow stuff. And they're telling you about the heavy deadlifts are like the hardest thing. And you're like, but running's totally fine, right? Jumping's totally fine. It's like, okay, this is a pure load, weight on the bar issue. So once the information starts coming in, it'll kind of just present itself to you. I mean,
So
it obviously gets more complex sometimes, but
when I was thinking about this earlier is like, we started off, the last episode was like the science of coaching, and now we're into the art of coaching, but we can't not flip flop back and forth.
no.
So let's go back towards the more science side of things. Somebody comes to you, the rehab guy, and they're like, oh, I've got this shoulder pain. And you see too much dynamic loading. What are your thoughts in terms of like, what could be the problem and what are the solutions? Or what's like the first intervention you're going to try to help them move on and continue to train?
The first intervention will be try those same types of movements at a slower speed and see how that goes. Right. And if it's totally fine, great. There's our starting point. We do strict pull-ups instead of muscle ups or chest to bars. And we slowly kind of reintroduce the faster ones. And again, you would look back and see what got them there, right? If it was a crazy jump in volume or even a prolonged period of super, super high volume that got them there, then you can probably get them back there pretty quick after just a little bit of backing off, right? So if they've been used to it, but they're just doing too much. It's like, okay, just back off for a little bit, recover. You'll probably get back to that, no problem. Whereas if it's like somebody that just did chest to bars for the first time and that's what caused it, and they can only do 5 strict pull-ups, that's a different picture, but it's the same issue, right? So the progression is going to be different for that person, but both of those people had pain because of super high intensity dynamic pulling, and they can both do slower loading, no problem. So that's going to be the starting point, just different volumes.
Would you say that at the root of it, it's a disproportionate relationship between dynamic loading and controlled loading?
Maybe. I think in the latter case, that person probably it's just too weak to be doing that effectively, right? If they can only do 5 strict pull-ups,
Mm,
you probably want to do more than that before you're doing a bunch of cycled chest to bars. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, then that kind of like excludes a lot of people, right? So it's just like, do we need to do that? Maybe not, but they'd be better off if they were stronger, right? And then doing chest to bars. Whereas the first case, it could have been, maybe they're doing just too much of both and the proportion was fine, but they were just doing too much.
right.
Could
Like
be,
the ratio is 50-50, but
Mhm.
they're doing 500 reps of each.
Yeah.
Like that's too much.
Yeah.
You're good. 75 is good.
Yeah.
What about the other end of that spectrum where it's the heavy, slow stuff that's bothering somebody?
Then, yeah. So then you just kind of back. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of different cases, but you back off on the loading a little bit, maybe try to build some easy volume for a little while, probably check in on the technique, right? If it's, the technique's really falling apart at the heavy load, maybe that's why. And it's just getting way out of control.
This
Back
goes
off.
back to your point about building some easy volume though, right?
Yeah. It's still the same idea, right? Like you take it, if you generalize it enough, it's always the same process.
Yeah.
It's take away whatever, stress is too much. And then you kind of reapproach it in some way. And that, in terms of intensity, in terms of volume, in terms of speed, rate of loading.
It's interesting. Greg Lehman had a post recently about like everybody wants to dissect the why and be like really specific with this diagnosis, but it rarely informs your treatment approach or your training approach because those training approaches are kind of universal. Right? Like it's like, oh, you have this subacromial impingement, right? Your supraspinatus is quite irritated. But if it were like an infraspinatus or an irritation or a subscap irritation, you do the exact same thing.
Yeah. You would do whatever makes the most sense, regardless of what right? And it could be the same movements and the same progression, or it could be completely different just because of how the patient presents in their, like what causes the issue, right? So you could have 2 people with, a MRI confirmed supraspinatus tear, but different things hurt. Well, then you still have to take a different approach because, what are you going to tell them to do? Just do the same shit because it's a supraspinatus tear? It's like, no. And most of the time we don't actually have that information. So then what are you going to do? It's like, yeah, just whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
It's great to have the information and I think it's super fun to do deep dives on some of this stuff, but you have to live in the real world, right?
Yeah. As coaches, and I'm sure as clinicians, it's easy to get dragged into that stuff, right? Like we got into it with the zone 2 stuff, right? Like all of this mechanistic explanation type of thing. And it's fun to talk about. And it definitely like creates buy-in with clients when you're able to demonstrate that you have a deep level of understanding of what's going on with the anatomy and physiology and injury and so on and so forth. But the solutions are often very simple, even when the problems might be quite complex.
Yeah.
It's,
Agreed.
it's a hard one to wrap. Like running technique is one of the ones that got me early on as a coach, especially because CrossFit used to have their post running seminar and all of that. And you're like, oh, you have to run with this 4-foot midfoot strike and cadence and so on and so forth. And then the more you learn about it, you're like, none of it matters. Like, all that matters is a good training program. Just don't do too much too soon and make sure that it's enough to drive adaptation. And you're going to get faster at running. You're going to get as fast as you're going to get.
Yeah. I tend to lean that way for sure. I think I'm probably too far in that direction and I could open my mind up a little bit but I think that's just a more practical way to approach these problems rather than getting caught up in hyper specific biomechanics and, this and that, right?
Yeah. All right, let's get back on track. So we're kind of like we're continuing our way through this assessment process, and we're at like, what have they been doing? What can their training program look like? I think it's definitely time to start breaking out the needs, right? Like, we know what they want to do. We know where they are. We know what they can give to the program. I want to start ranking the importance of things that we're going to focus on. So you've got your 3 domains, right? Strength, endurance, and skill. This person's got a 100-pound strict chest to bar pull-up and 6 unbroken ring muscle ups. You're like, your technique, and 250,000 meter row, or like a 642K ski. You're like, your technique on the ring muscle up sucks, right? Like, it's just so blatantly obvious that we're going to put the bulk of our energy towards technique. And with that, you will get way, way, way better when it's going to cost you hardly anything at all. So I start looking at those items. Where do they need to be stronger? If they need to be stronger. So looking at their numbers. And we talked a little bit about that Poliquin strength ratio thing. I would more gravitate towards comparisons against other athletes in the sport. I think that's more realistic. Like, what is your back squat? How does it stack up against the other athletes in the sport? We talked about snatch and clean and jerk because those are kind of the most important. Snatch, clean and jerk, front squat. It was actually snatch, clean, front squat, jerk, max strict handstand push-ups were like our 4 key strength metrics. And if you are like comparable to everybody else in the sport, you're probably good enough. Add deadlift in there, and we don't need to worry about strength. So strength goes into this like maintenance category. We don't want you to get any weaker. We want to make sure that you still have the ability to productively apply force. Strength training is the best way to maintain that and maintain your strength. Now let's go to our endurance scores. What are the endurance scores for the level that you want to compete at? Like a 2K row, it's probably somewhere between 620 and 640. 500 meters, it's in that like low 120s. Run, we definitely want to see like a 540 mile if you're going to be competing at that level, that like semifinal level. And then you just start like picking away at them, and you look for those deficiencies, and then you start ranking them. This is high priority. This is medium priority. This is low priority. And then from there, start building out plans to attack each one. What are your, like, where do you take that information and run with it?
That is exactly how I would put it. It's like goals, abilities, priorities, right?
Yeah.
So then you have now the startings of the program design. So then you just take the priorities and you take the schedule and you start slotting them in, right? So let's say they got 5 sessions a week. Your example, the strength is good enough. Maybe hitting 1 heavy lifting session for each lift per week. So that might be like 2. You could do like snatch and deadlift in the same day, and like clean and jerk and squat or something like that. So that's 2 lifting sessions a week to maintain. Right.
Yeah.
So you've got that, and then you've got 3 more sessions, which will be, whatever, right? That'll be the priority. Or maybe there's 2 things per session, and you've got, let's say 10 slots. So you've got 3 out of 10 are devoted to strengths, and that's your maintenance level. And then like 6 out of those 10 slots are going to the top priority. And then there's some stuff in between there as well. Something like that, right? You just start to kind of chunk things into the schedule, like, take your category and you start to fit it into this puzzle.
This might be a good opportunity to start talking about high-low training too.
For sure. Yeah.
In terms of like, high-low training is, I think, often misrepresented because people just look at it as in like anything where you're lifting heavy is a high, Anything where you're lifting moderate is a medium, and anything where you're lifting light is a low. But not everybody responds the same way. So like you might have this very strong athlete and you go, okay, strength is in a maintenance piece. And so we're just going to do like, I don't know, 3 sets of 2 in the snatch at 80 to 85%. But the results of that are quite a bit of soreness, maybe the shoulders or something like that. And even though they can do it, it still ends up with like a high training stress towards them. And it's going to impact the session that follows, either the PM session or the next day session. And this is kind of getting like really specific, where it's not as much of a broad look at things, but then you have to start looking at like, well, what is the actual priority when we get into that? Mobility needs to be a higher priority, and so on and so forth. So once you block them out, then you want to start placing them in the right spots. And that's where the art really comes in, is getting a feel for how people respond to and adapt to training. Right? Like I might think that 3 sets of 2 at 80 to 85% in the snatch is an easy workout, but for somebody that might be actually quite a tough workout, or it might not be enough to maintain that adaptation that we want to maintain. And they might need quite a bit more. And it might be at a lower percentage, or they might need more at even higher percentages. So starting to organize your training week or your microcycle around, because a microcycle doesn't have to be 5 or 7 days long. It can be 14 days long, or it can be 10 days long, depending upon the schedule of the person. So starting to organize things based upon stress and recovery. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely like getting information about what is most fatiguing, what's hardest to recover from. Not only what are they good at or what are they bad at, right? Because then that's going to dictate the order of things. So even if the priority is one thing, you might still put it in a different part of the workout depending on how they're recovering from other stuff, right? Or vice versa. You'd probably take the other stuff to a different spot if it's interfering with the priority. So like for me, I'll just use myself as an example, like that example of, well, maybe not snatches, like lifting in general is hard for me to recover from. Like it beats me up almost no matter what it is. If it's a barbell, I'm going to be tired. And cardio is the exact opposite. I can do intervals on a cardio machine and sometimes I'll just feel better after. Like I'll sometimes perform better with a barbell after I'm tired from cardio. I think that's mostly psychological because I'm thinking about it too much, but
Yeah.
the pattern is definitely different from somebody else that might, after some air bike sprints or rowing or whatever, they might be on the floor for half an hour, right? Whereas with heavy lifting, they could do that every day. So yeah, that piece is pretty important. And then that not only informs the order of things, but could also inform the length of the microcycle, right? It's like strength is on maintenance because they're already pretty strong. And they also take a long time to recover from heavy lifting. Then you're going to have a longer microcycle. So you say like heavy deadlifts, like it takes, they don't feel good for over a week after a heavy deadlift session. Okay, let's do it once every 2 weeks then.
Right.
And then they're probably still going to maintain because they're already really strong, but they can keep that heavy stimulus and not interfere with other stuff, not accumulate too much fatigue.
Yeah. And then you're just constantly checking in with that specific session and some sort of correlate data to see that they're maintaining it, right? Like maybe they're doing some barbell cycling work or rowing performances. How are they cycling their dumbbell snatches, given the deadlift example? If they're still doing all of those things well, then you know that, and their deadlift numbers are staying steady and their RPE is staying steady on those deadlift sessions, then it's good. But if those things are starting to be affected by it, then you're like, okay, well, now we actually need to prioritize this maybe a little bit more. Another thing I like to look at in that high-low model is not just the recovery demand of certain sessions, but the performance demand of certain sessions. So you made the argument, you can do a bunch of cardio. Like let's say on Wednesday is your big cardio day. And then Thursday is your heavy deadlift day. For me, I'm going to get more tired from doing high intensity interval work on Wednesday, and that heavy deadlift day on Thursday is going to suffer. I won't be as fresh. And if that is a priority, then I need to make sure that the session that goes before that is a lower stress session. So maybe we put on my Wednesday a heavy technique session. And then I can come into my deadlift session with a little bit more gusto. But you, on the other hand, the performance or the recovery demand is less, and the performance demand isn't quite so high. So I usually focus more on that performance demand when it's like skill specific work. So whether it's gymnastic skills or weightlifting skills, I want to make sure that the person is feeling sharp and feeling good about themselves. They have confidence going in instead of this kind of like, oh, I'm and hawing, like aches and pains. I don't know how this is going to go type of thing. If the goal is to develop some sort of neurological change, then you want to make sure that they're primed and ready to do that.
Yeah. If the point is to get better and they're not going to be able to do things well because they're so tired, then this just defeats the purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you might do something like that with some sort of pure endurance athlete or like a bodybuilder. They might just feel beat up every day because they're doing the same shit. But not even that, like that's still not even the right approach, right? It's like quality is not going to be good. You're probably still not going to get the most out of it. So yeah.
That's where I think this idea of like key training sessions comes in, is when you start developing your hierarchy of needs and then you start putting priorities towards specific training sessions, is you drop those key training sessions in where they are going to be performed at their best. And I would start with an individual schedule. So, let's say somebody's a shift worker, right? They do 2 days, 2 nights, 4 off. Well, I'm probably going to put their 2 key sessions on their 2nd and 4th day off.
Yeah.
And then everything else is going to be built around that. And I want those 2 key sessions to be their best sessions. And then you start looking at stress and how they adapt, how they respond to other stressful things. So if they don't find that heavy conditioning work is all that stressful, then I'll put their heavy conditioning work before their key workout. If heavy conditioning work is quite stressful and they find it hard to recover from, well, then I'll put it 2 or 3 days before their key workouts or the day after their key workout.
Yeah.
And that's just making sure that we're prioritizing that key training session, because that's the most important thing in our training plan. It's the thing that we want to see grow the fastest. So we're really going to hone in on that training session.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'll just use myself as an example because I have all the details. That schedule that you just described is basically exactly what I'm doing right now. It's like Monday is a strength session mostly, and that's after a rest day. Tuesday is a bunch of like harder intervals and stuff, right? A big Metcon day after the strength work, right? Wednesday is easy cardio, and then Thursday is another strength day.
Mm-hmm.
So you put in the hard stuff, put in the priorities where they're going to do the best, and then you put the kind of the stuff that's a little bit lower down priority slotted in there where it's going to interfere least with those priorities, the key sessions.
Yeah. And I think that's how most people would intuitively design training programs, because it makes the most sense. Right? We're talking about you. On the complete opposite side of that spectrum is me, where my key sessions are going to be more volume based, right? Like I am much stronger than I am fit. So my Monday session should probably be something that's like, a 4x4 where I can come into it and get after it aggressively. And then Tuesday can be Olympic weightlifting and gymnastics at 75%. And then I could do my heavy lifting on the Wednesday. And then Thursday can be either rest or like another heavy conditioning session. And then a rest day, or then, more skills training, and then some easier work because I need to increase my volume. But it's like, my key sessions are 4 per week instead of 2 per week. And they're very much built around volume and intensity in a sport specific setting versus, honestly, if we're actually using me as an example, sport specific setting is not really that important because I've been doing the sport for almost 20 years. So I don't need to get better at muscle ups. I'll probably increase my muscle up capacity by improving my 2K ski.
Yeah.
And my stat is just going to go up. Like if I, put a little bit of work into my upper back and dial in my overhead squat, do like 2 jump sessions a week for 4 weeks, I'll probably snatch 265 or 275.
Yeah. Like just even dialing up the intensity in general for a few weeks, your snatch is going to improve probably by like 5%.
Yeah.
Just by training hard again or harder like
Yeah.
you used to. Yeah.
Yeah. But the key sessions are way more fitness based than strength based. So I think it's definitely an interesting comparison, 2 sides of the discussion, where one person is a way more naturally enduring athlete and their key sessions are strength based, and a little bit younger in the sport. So maybe technical proficiency as well. And another one, much more of a powerful athlete, a lot longer time in the sport. So it's just like bring the fitness up. Honestly, my training for the Open this year was running twice a week.
Nice.
I made
That's
sure
great.
that I could do enough pull-ups, handstand push-ups, muscle ups, and burpees. And then I ran twice a week. I just need to get my heart and lungs going and I'll do fine, I think. And I did like fine enough.
That's great. I love that.
It's funny how the sport is like, it works that way.
Yeah. And it seems like you did pretty well too. Like you had some good scores and
Yeah, it kind of fell apart after week 1, if I'm being honest.
fair. Yeah.
I shot myself in the foot though. I think week 2 could have been better. I was happy with week 3. It wasn't like a really good score, but it was a good score. And week 2 was just like a complete, a known miss pace, right? Because I was like, essentially, for anybody who's listening, I wanted to prove to people that going unbroken on the pull-ups and chest bars was a terrible strategy. So that's what I did. And it was. It took me 5 minutes to get through my 20 ring muscle ups. And I think a couple months ago, I tested 30 ring muscle ups for time. And I was like around 4 minutes or something like that, 4.5 minutes to do 30. So yeah, listen to your coaches.
Yeah. Are you going to do the quarterfinals workouts?
No, not all that interested.
Yeah, that's fair.
Although they are kind of like decent workouts for me. None of them are like going to bother my elbow or my shoulder all that much. So I could do them. I just don't want to go through the discomfort.
Yeah. Just go for a run.
Pretty much. Although my Achilles has been bothering me.
Oh, no.
Badly, so it's not really pinpoint local. So I'm not that concerned, but I'm going to start doing some more calf raises.
There you go.
Broad strokes. We've got a couple more notes here. Communication. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that term, coach, athlete communication?
For me, it's the, it's the everyday kind of sedentary person that comes to mind. Um, I think it's hard for people to understand that doing exercise is going to help them with something that has nothing to do with exercise, right? Like they've been sitting all day and their back hurts. Exercise will help. And I think there's a bunch of reasons why it might, depending on the case, whatever the case may be. But I think for regular people, it's really hard to connect those dots. It's like lifting weights is bad for your back. How's that going to help my back? And, this type of thing. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind because that's what I, hear and see every day.
Mhm.
But, the one right after that is definitely the polar opposite, which comes in with some frequency as well. It's like, oh yeah, I haven't run all winter and then went for a 10K yesterday and my shins hurt a lot. And I'm like, okay, you're an idiot. But no, I don't say that. Yeah, like still exercise is the answer, but we also have to manage that training progression, which there wasn't one, right?
So for you, the challenge is communicating the treatment plan, I guess, for lack of a better word, creating buy-in and meeting the individual where they're at, right? Like, cause I'm sure if like the person who sits all day long and you're trying to convince them that lifting weights is going to make their back hurt, you start citing research papers and telling them this and that about, like emotional states and the multifactorial web that is complex pain. And it's just like, right, you've lost them.
Yeah.
How do you start that? Like, how do you communicate that to them? How do you create that buy-in?
Yeah. The former case, so the sedentary folks, I don't typically talk in scientific terms at all. I don't even go there at all unless they express some kind of interest or they have some sort of background maybe in that. Then definitely you could communicate with them that way. If they did a science degree, maybe you might start to use some of that. But yeah, you'll lose them right away if that's how you approach it. So you just have to get like, again, they're kind of like their goals, right? It's like, what do you want to do? How are we going to make that better? And if there's anything that they want to do that the pain is interfering with, then you have it in, right? Then you have, okay, here's how we make that better. The hardest one is when people don't actually want to do anything or they don't express any interest in anything, then it's really hard. I don't have an answer for that person. It's like, what are your hobbies? Watching TV. Okay, what's work and do you enjoy your job? It's fine. What do you do? Sit at the computer, accounting, and yeah, for that one, I have no idea. I don't know how to do. I don't know how to fix that. But as soon as they express some interest in something, then you can just take the same approach that we've gone through, but you're applying it to, you know, hobby like pickleball or whatever, right? And you're saying, okay, so we can make your swing better and make you a little quicker from line to line with these exercises. And then they start doing them and then their back starts getting better, even though you could maybe not even say anything about the back pain potentially, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you just have to, you find some kind of way in and make a little bit of even just like a personal connection and then get some buy-in maybe that way, or get some buy-in through the activity, the goal. And then you can start to, okay, here's how we get there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I have 2 points off of I guess there are more questions.
yeah,
One is it must be incredibly challenging and frustrating when you have people coming to you thinking that the act of coming to the clinic is what's going to get them better when it's the other 23 and a half hours a day of 6 out of 7 days a week. Right? Like they're only going to see you for 30 minutes a week, maybe. And it just can't be done. You just can't get them better inside the clinic. And then two, how often do you like throw a complete airball when you're like, oh, this is going to get you better at this. And I'm hoping that I can just get you to commit to a plan with some sort of carrot. And they're like, they go home, you never hear from them again. And the reason that you never hear from them again is because I went to see this fucking Sasha guy about my back pain and he wouldn't shut up about pickleball. Like, I don't care that much about pickleball, but my back hurts a lot.
It happens. And kind of the only way that I know it happens is just you never see them, never hear from them again. You follow up an email, no answer. And just assume that, yeah, okay, you just didn't connect with that person for whatever reason. So yeah, it happens for sure. Airballs.
The former we see a lot in the gym, right? Where people think that attending a 1 hour CrossFit class 3 times per week or 5 times per week is going to be enough to make them fit or get them the results that they want. And this is multi-pronged, right? Like when we talked about the person who wants to go from open to quarterfinals is like, when you're there, you need to apply yourself. If it's more of a social thing than a fitness thing, then the results probably aren't going to come. And then in addition to that is just like all of the other lifestyle pieces that need to be in place for people to not just respond to the stress and adapt positively, but to make the changes that they want to see, whether that be recovery, like sleep, nutrition. Most people join a gym because they want to lose weight, and the 200 to 300 calories that you might burn in a 1 hour CrossFit class is just not going to move the needle, not even close. Especially when you don't, it's like, even if you're tracking, it's hard to account for 200 calories in a day.
Totally.
A handful of chips here, some sort of Starbucks beverage, and bang, it's all undone.
Yeah.
So those are definite challenges that I think, and I would assume that it's much harder in a clinical sense because people are like, oh yeah, like I'm here. I went to the chiropractor and it didn't get better. I went to the physiotherapist and my shoulder still hurts. And you're like, oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah. It is nice when you do get those kind of home runs. It doesn't happen super often, but every once in a while with 1 or 2 treatments, you can fix stuff or it gets better in that amount of time. Maybe it got better, right? Maybe you didn't fix anything, but sometimes an adjustment will take away pain entirely. And sometimes a knee extension isometric will take away all of their knee pain with squatting. It does happen. So those are great, but yeah, they're not the norm, unfortunately.
Yeah.
How do you bring somebody back to earth that is always doing too much?
Bring somebody, that's probably one of the hardest ones, especially with like the population that I deal with is competitive CrossFit athletes, right? And you don't get there by dogging it. So oftentimes what people think they need is more. They need to train more. They need to train harder. And luckily for me, buy-in is already there. I can speak to people in a more of an educated way, and they're not going to gloss over. I can still sometimes lose them, but they're a lot more invested in the process. So you can send them like research articles and be like, you just summarize it for them. This article tells us this. This article tells us this. This article tells us like what you need is not more. What you need is better. We need to optimize your training plan. So that one is like, it's definitely challenging when people come to you and they think what they need is more. But I think if you have another way is if you have a really good intake and assessment, then you can show it to them on paper. And then, you basically It doesn't take an hour, but you walk through what you and I just did. And it's like, here's the low hanging fruit. Here is the plan of attack. And this is how we're going to approach it. And you lay it out for them and you create some checkpoints along the way and they can see it in their mind's eye. And all you need to do after that is like weekly, bi-weekly check-ins. And when they start questioning things, just always bring them back. Okay, what's the focus of our current training plan? It's to get stronger. So yeah, it makes sense that your fitness is feeling low and you probably feel like you need to do more machine work or more zone 2 or whatever it is, but that's not going to move you closer to your goal. We need to stay focused on our goal. And once we reach this KPI that we've identified, once you back squat 200 kilos or 450 pounds, then we can start entertaining that discussion around adding in more zone 2 work, or you say something like, something that I do is I create annual plans for people. We could probably do an entire episode on long-term planning and periodization, but it creates buy-in for them. So what I'll do is I drop in their competitions and I'm like, okay, well, your next competition isn't until July, right? We're recording this podcast at the end of March. So we've got 18 weeks. How long do you think you need to work on your fitness to be fit enough to compete at that competition? And how important is it for you to be strong enough when you get to that competition? So for the next 12 weeks, we're going to keep the conditioning where it's at, and we're going to really focus on strength. And then 6 weeks out, we'll kind of like move that strength quality that we've hopefully built up into our maintenance position. And then we're going to take our conditioning and we're going to drop it into priority position. And we'll start building some key workouts around conditioning and sport specific performance. And they're like, oh, okay. And I think that it pays off in spades for people to know that you have a plan instead of just like winging it, right? People don't like to be kept in the dark and they don't like to have to make assumptions. And when trust really starts to break down is when they start to make the assumption that you don't have a plan and you are just winging it. And the unfortunate part about being a coach is that the plan is very, very loose. You're constantly changing things up. So you have a plan, but you're not married to that plan at all. So it's this kind of like duality of personalities where one, you have this scientific model that they're just going to follow along and realization at the end. But you know that the path is going to be so much more meandering that it's just like in that area, you do kind of keep them in the dark.
It definitely helps to keep those targets in mind. It's like relay some of the plan, remind them of the targets, remind them of the end goal, and then you just keep bringing it back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice to have past training too, because you can go back and be like, hey, 6 weeks ago, we did this workout and these were your notes, right? And last week we did this workout and these were your notes. How do you think your performance in this key metric compares last week to 6 weeks ago? And they're like, wow, I can't believe that the difference in my performance after 5 weeks. So having those kind of like proof of concept, social proof type items, it also helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Data.
Another thing, like when I think of communication, is the way that you speak to people, like the types of things that you say. So are you telling them to contract their glutes? Are you telling them to flex and extend their shoulder, their elbow, those types of things? Just the words that you use. I think that can be really, really powerful. There's lots of really cool research around that stuff. Gabrielle Wolf is the one who I'm kind of like most familiar with. Nick Winkelman, I think, is probably the most popular from his time at Exos and then, or Athlete Performance and then Exos. And then I don't know what he's up to now. I think he's just in academia now, right? Or like doing something with rugby league.
Last I paid attention, he was with rugby.
Yeah, I think he got his PhD in whatever you want to call it, coaching, the language of coaching. But for anybody who's listening, if you haven't read The Language of Coaching, it's like top 5 must reads for a coach. Nick Winkelman. You've got on here motivational interviewing. Dive into that a little bit more.
I always think of this as just like Inception, basically. It's,
Oh, yes.
I love that movie. And when we learned about this concept, that's kind of what it sounded like. It's kind of guiding somebody to come to the conclusion you want them to, or that you think they need on their own. That's how
Like
I
almost hypnosis adjacent.
Yeah. You're getting very sleepy.
Yeah. Example of
Actually,
like how you might employ motivational interviewing.
so it's like very open-ended communication rather than very direct or specific, and maybe more questioning rather than like instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely helpful for those people that aren't really interested in hearing about the science, right? It's like your back, whatever, lower back pain, sedentary, right? It's like, well, why do you think your back hurts, right? What are you doing that you think is causing that? And then they say, well, I sit all day at work, right? And I was like, okay, well, what do you think you could do that might help with that? Well, I'll probably like get some exercise. Like, yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to do that?
Like the easy version of motivational interviewing, right? Like it rarely goes that smoothly.
Although it could be, but then they still don't do it. And that's the tough part, right? Then that's where the difficulty starts is like, okay, what do you like to do for exercise? Oh, I don't like exercise. I don't have time for exercise. It's like, okay. And then that's, then there's the real starting point. But yeah, kind of that like open-ended questioning, but with a little bit of a kind of a direction in mind based on the information, based on your expertise and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's kind of like a bit of a nudging, hey? Like you ask a question and then they take it over here and you kind of ask a question like this and it nudges them this way. And then you ask that question again and it nudges them back. And you just keep corralling them in the direction of an answer. You don't know what that answer is going to be. You hope that it's what you want it to be, but you don't know what it's going to be. But you start to like get an idea of what it's going to be the more questions you ask. And
yeah,
it's an interesting kind of subject because I definitely threw you under the bus there when I was like, tell me about motivational interviewing. Because anybody you ask who's looked into it is like, that a tough question to answer. What is motivational interviewing? But yeah, I guess that would be quite powerful for you, right? Because for me, people come to me and they're already plenty motivated. So I don't need to find motivation to get them to go somewhere. But for you, definitely much more. How about those like discussions around setbacks? I'm sure you have patients who you might see on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And they, one day they come in and they're really down and it's like, oh, I've been doing my exercises religiously and I had another back pain flare up and I'm just like so frustrated. How do you handle something like that?
that can be tough too. I try to find something that they can like blame, for lack of a better term. So dig into the recovery, dig into the stress load, and try to find a reason that they can kind of attack, like hold on to, right? It's like, how have you been sleeping? What else have you been up to? Right. And for the last 6 months, people have been sick within the last few weeks, almost universally. So you can kind of like point to that and be like, before you got sick, you were making great progress, right? Like, yeah, things are feeling good. And then 2 weeks ago, you got sick, you couldn't sleep, this and that. And it's like, oh yeah. And then you can just start to kind of look. And if there is no reason, then it's really tough, right? But often there is, you can find something if you just do a little bit of investigation. Um, and then, yeah, with the athletes, it's often comes down to that progression where they'll say they didn't do anything. They say nothing happened. And you do a little bit of digging and they've, they had some kind of crazy workout that they either forgot about or thought was normal. And it was like way out of the norm for them in terms of volume. Or runners are the easiest example, right? They're easy to pick on because they'll just go for any distance, regardless of what they're prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
Because you kind of can, right? It's like running, you can slow down and just keep going pretty much. And then you have a tibial stress fracture and that doesn't happen immediately. So then again, you just kind of like look for those things that they can understand as contributing factors and hope that they kind of realize the connection there. And sometimes they don't. It's pretty tough, but that's kind of the strategy.
It probably works really well as a segue into motivational interviewing, right? Like where you're trying to get them, you know, to come up with their own solution. And so you go through, OPEX has this really cool acronym. They call it NEPA: notice, experience, prescribe, assess. And you just rinse and repeat through that. So they come in, they've been doing all this stuff, and then, oh, they were sick. And you're like, oh, well, maybe that's responsible for your flare up. Well, why do you think you got sick? Like, oh, I don't know. Well, what sorts of things were going on in your life around that time? Oh, well, I went on this like 3-day stag in Vegas with my buddies and we slept for like 4 hours. And then I came back and we had this crazy week at work. You're like, oh, okay. So you think maybe that had something to do with it. It's like, oh yeah. Yeah. Or like whenever I was traveling or something. Right. And you're like, well, like how much is this flare up of pain affecting your life? It's pretty bad. Is it enough for you to consider those types of factors or this recovery side of things? Do you think that was the issue? Well, yeah, maybe, probably it was. Okay. Well, what sorts of things would you be willing to change to try? And it doesn't have to be like no more stags with your buddies. Cause like you only get married 1 or 2 or 3 times. So, so you don't always get those opportunities. You don't want to miss out on them, but like, there's things that you can do to hedge against it. So I guess it all folds in together.
You can't be too extreme or, too judgmental or too firm, at least not right off the bat, right? You just kind of have to let things unfold a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody, especially adults, want to be lectured on their choices and their lifestyle. Can be a pretty sensitive subject. On that same kind of communication side, we talked a little bit about high-low training and how we are assessing response to stress, because that's essentially what we're trying to manage. What are your communication styles around assessing how people are doing, how they're adapting to stress? Is it too much? Is it too little? So on and so forth. What are the kind of like checkpoints that you're after?
It depends on the person, I guess, but checking in on those priorities and how they're going in their training. It's like they're working on those consistently, right? So you can keep track of those pretty consistently. And if they're just all good, things just every workout feels good, better, great. Nice. Don't have to change anything. If they get a few sessions in a row of like, yeah, they're not feeling good, or the pain's starting to come back with these, it's like, okay, we got to change direction a little bit or modify something. Or so, checking in with basically whatever the goal is, whatever the priorities are that they're working on. check in on those. And sometimes it's like again, kind of like a indirect, right? A little bit of an open-ended question. It's like, oh, how's things? How's the training been? And kind of let them sometimes, right? Because if you asked, oh, how are the chest bars today? And they'll be like, sometimes that's not the way to get the information, right?
Oh yeah.
With competitive athletes, that is probably usually the way, but sometimes you got to kind of let them. Maybe they don't want to tell you that it's going poorly. Maybe they don't want to admit that it's not getting better or something. So then you have to let the information come when it's going to come.
Mhm. And that's where you really get into the art of knowing how to communicate with individuals, right? With some people, you might ask, how was training this week? And they're going to give you an honest answer. Mm, but I would say probably more than half are just going to say good, right? Or yeah, it was great. And that's all you're going to get. And it's not going to be until 12 weeks later that they're like, hey, things aren't really going the way that I hoped that they would. And I think it's time for us to part ways. And you kind of need to dig into that a little
Yeah.
bit more. I'm really lucky that I get videos from people. So one of the things that I watch quite closely is body language, just kind of like posture, urgency in training. I'll pay attention to transition times. That'll tell me a lot about how somebody is feeling. If they look like energetic and spry, pretty reliably, they're in a good place. If they're like head is down and they're dragging ass, or if the comments on their stuff is like felt slow today, that kind of thing, that's when you know that something is up, right? And it may be completely unrelated to training. And I think if you are a confident coach, then you'll have the confidence to dig into that and ask them like, hey, what's going on? How's life? Do you feel like your training is too much? With competitive athletes, almost across the board, they are never going to tell you that training is too much. You might get 1 out of 100 that's like, I think my training is too much right now. More often than not, it's probably some sort of life stress. And hopefully you can build the relationship with them where they feel comfortable sharing those things with you, and you can, coach them, for lack of a better word, through that and around expectations.
Yeah. It's tricky.
Yeah. It's definitely not the comfortable side
Yeah.
of coaching, right? Coaching would be a lot easier if people were robots and they just responded without emotion. But when people get heavily invested in their training, lots of time, lots of energy, lots of money, lots of sacrifice, then they can become quite emotional around it. And it's not always easy, but I think meeting those people with empathy is the first and most important thing, and trying to understand where they're coming from and just appreciate their struggle. That is probably one of the few things that separates great coaches apart from good coaches. Because you can know everything there is about whatever there is to know, physiology, training programs, so on and so forth. But if you scare all your clients away, you're not going to get any results.
Yeah. Agreed.
It seems like it's like a half decent place to leave it.
Yeah. I like that.
All right, man. Are you heading to the gym?
No, I'm going to go actually practice golf. I'm going to Phoenix next weekend and I'm going to play with my cousins. So I'm going to practice a little bit.
Oh, that's probably.
And then I'll do 2 tomorrow, 2 Sunday, and yeah, maybe a pretty light week next week, maybe.
Okay, man. I'll catch you later.
Okay, sounds good. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Cheers.